Let's turn now to the Conservatives. A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride. Mel Stride, do you think the Prime Minister's right to get involved in the negotiations over Ukraine?
Absolutely. I think it's really important we get a just peace when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And that has to include, for example, security guarantees for Ukraine so that whatever peace is finally concluded sticks, and we're not left with a situation where Russia is just basically gearing up for the next attempt to violate Ukraine's sovereignty. So I think we do actually, as a country, have an important role to play diplomatically in all of that to make sure that this proposed arrangement moves in the right direction.
I take it from what you're saying that you don't think much of the Trump 28 points.
Well, look, it's a starting position, and he indicated, the US president last night, that that isn't his final position. I think he's right to say that. But it does seem to me that a proposal in which Ukraine gives up the whole of the Donbass, limits its army to 600,000, makes a clear statement that it will not be joining NATO at any point and therefore not have perhaps those security guarantees in place is probably some way from where a final settlement will land. But we've got to encourage all sides to continue on this path of negotiation to arrive at that point of a just peace. And we certainly have a key role to play in that process.
OK, before we come to the budget, one other thing that's happened this week is Lord Gove apologised for the failures of the last Conservative government, of which he was a member, over COVID. Would you like to join him in that apology?
Yeah, I think that where the inquiry has concluded that there were excess deaths due to certain decisions that were taken that might, with hindsight, and stress with hindsight, have been taken differently, then of course I think that's appropriate. At the same time, I don't think we should overlook the fact that, of course, it's very easy to look back in time. This was a once-in-a-century event, a very difficult moment for our country, and of course mistakes will have been made. We need to learn from those. The report also says, of course, that the vaccine rollout was extremely successful, and we had got the economy, by getting the deficit down at that point, to a stage where we were able to borrow billions of pounds to support millions of jobs and people's livelihoods up and down the country. And I don't think that should be overlooked either. So there were great successes around the COVID period, as well as inevitably some failings.
All right, let's talk about the budget. Chancellor's going to speak on Wednesday. Apart from the words, "I resign," what would you most like to hear from her?
Well, I want to see the Chancellor stand up and explain how she is going to control public spending, particularly welfare, in order to make sure that we're not having to put up taxes, and she's not going to be breaking all those promises that she's made yet again, in order to get the economy moving and get business moving. Because part of the story of why we're in the position we are in, Trevor, is that she's loaded up taxes on businesses, particularly jobs, borrowed a lot of money, spent a lot of money, put up inflation, interest rates higher than they would otherwise have been, and mounted up our national debt. The servicing costs upon which are now 100 billion a year, or twice what we spent on defence. Your
government did give it a bit of a nudge towards 100% of GDP.
Well, we've just moved from the previous question about COVID, and I think most people felt it was right that we intervened and supported millions of jobs up and down the country. That came with a price tag of £400 billion, and that did have to then feed into being paid off later on down the line too. But my point is simply this: she has a clear choice. She can either go for just putting up loads of more taxes, which will continue to keep us in this doom loop of higher taxes, lower growth, destroyed fiscal headroom, going back for more taxes. That's the loop she's in. To break out of that cycle, she's got to get some backbone. She's got to get some backbone and get in there and get government spending under control, particularly welfare. But the signs are, Trevor, if I may finish this final point, is that she's actually going to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which is the cap that means that up to 2 children are covered by benefits in families. But if you want to have a larger family than that, you should be taking, I think, the same tough choices that taxpayers take when it comes to whether you can afford to have a larger family or not.
So you're not that keen on doing what the Institute for Fiscal Studies reckons that lifting the two-child cap would do, which is get 630,000 children out of poverty. You're not too keen on that?
So, look, the best way of getting people and families out of poverty is through work and employment. And where we are on that is very clear. We don't believe that it's right to have a culture in our country where too many people are on benefits. They don't have the incentive to go in to work for a living, as many millions of people up and down our country, hard-working people who get up early in the morning, who struggle away with those jobs are doing. We think that should be the primary option for everybody.
So work solves poverty, all right. What about the 15-year freeze on fuel tax? Should that be maintained?
Well, we'll have to see
what... duty, I should say.
We'll have to see what the government does, but at the end of the day, we froze it, and we froze it for a very good reason, which is, of course, it feeds into the kind of costs that people are facing on a day-to-day basis. And the problem is, Trevor...
You wouldn't be keen on freezing it now?
Well, I'm not the Chancellor about to give a budget, OK? But what I would observe is this, that this government and this Chancellor has driven our economy into the ground, loaded us up with debt, higher unemployment, lower growth, higher inflation and so on. And the consequences of that, I'm afraid, are that things are far tighter on just those kind of questions than they would otherwise be.
All right, well,
room for manoeuvre is very limited.
All right,
that's the tragedy of the situation.
Let me ask you about another one, which isn't about sort of instant, and where you could and should have the view, I would suggest. Is it time to end the triple lock on pensions?
So we stand by the triple lock. And I think, Trevor, people too readily...
it's unsustainable, don't you?
Well, people too readily overlook the fact that under the last Labour government, we had the fourth highest level of pensioner poverty in Europe. And people are now no longer constantly talking about pensioner poverty, pensioners dying in cold winters and so on. The problem is not completely...
And isn't that the case for getting rid of it? Because we've solved the problem.
A part of that. But the other point I was going to go on to make is if you then look at the circumstances of pensioners, of course, they're not in a position typically to be able to go and get another job or get a job or go out and work longer hours because by definition they are retired. So I think it's really important and fundamental that we look after our pensioners in that way.
All right, well, last point about the policy. You've made the case for the abolition of stamp duty completely.
Yeah.
What about council tax? Is it time to revalue it?
So these are things that we are looking at as part of our policy renewal programme. The last valuation was in the early 1990s. So there's no doubt that is an unsatisfactory situation, but that is something that we are looking at. We haven't made announcements on that at this point. We have...
But you're open to it?
What I've said is that I recognise that if you have a system which relies on property valuations going back about 30 years ago, that is clearly suboptimal and unsatisfactory. But it's not something where we've come to clear policy on that at the moment. We have plenty of time to do that between now and the general election. We have said, however, when it comes to business rates, on the business side, we should take 250,000 small businesses, pubs in our high streets out of business rates altogether. And we've shown where we can get the savings in areas like welfare, getting the benefits bill down to do that. And that's at the heart of the decisions, Trevor, is if you can get on top of spending, if you can get the welfare bill down, you can lower people's taxes.
One more quick one. Chancellor says that people have been mansplaining to her about how she should do her job. Are you one of the boys who's been mansplaining to her?
I think this is just all chaff that's being thrown up in the air, a smokescreen to try and get us off what's really happening. This isn't about gender.
Blokes always say
this is about mismanagement of the economy, Trevor, OK? And what Rachel Reeves can't step away from is the fact that we've now got unemployment at a 5-year high, spiralling inflation, people feeling a lot worse off, business confidence, rock bottom, anemic growth, and all of those challenges which are down to her choices, I'm afraid.
Mel Stride, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.